Welcome to the Pondwater Dave Show. My name is Justin Davis. I am your host each and every week. And each and every week we also have here, it's called the Pondwater Dave Show. So I guess we should have Pondwater Dave on the show, the man who counted Ric Flair's last match. Some people have compared him to a flattened chicken nugget. So Pondwater, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just sitting here thinking about that I've had a good run, that I may be circling the drain. My days may be numbered. Because I looked up today and I realized I was eating dinner at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at Cracker Barrel with all the other elderlies.
And the experience didn't go too well.
No, they screwed my legs off. I ordered this chicken, this maple chicken bacon dish, smothered, and I had to move all the bacon to see the chicken, and the chicken was so small. I mean, it was...
Yeah, it was smothered and covered because there was no chicken under there.
Yeah, it was bad. It was barely a nugget.
Get it together, Cracker Barrel.
Be better, Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, I love your pancakes, but, Dave's he's got an issue.
Right, we got to stand together.
Miss Amy Vaughn, the First Lady of the Arn Anderson Fan Club. What is going on?
Not a whole lot. I'm doing good. We're recording on Ash Wednesday and, preparing myself for Lent. So,
what are you giving up? What are we going to do here?
I am going to abstain from sweets.
Oh.
That's a big one for me. So, so I think that will be good. And
so you can't talk to me or Dave next week.
Do what?
You can't talk to me or Dave then next week.
Oh.
I was going to ask who it was lent to.
Oh, Lordy. I am going to offer more prayers up for my cohorts. And so.
Yes, we need it.
Yes. I went to church Sunday and the building didn't cave in on me. So there's that.
That's always a good thing.
Dave, did you watch the Dave Letterman show back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
You know when he used to make a joke and they would just do the bass that, ooh, that's what we need when you do that. That would be awesome.
We got this.
Yeah, that sounds like
That's a high dollar production right there. We're big market. We're big time.
Well, we are big time this week because we're going to be talking about a very special person, someone that we just lost, the great Jarrett. So we will definitely be remembering his amazing life and times. And before we do that, Miss Amy, of course, has got some Memphis wrestling trivia for us, and I'm excited for this.
Yes.
Memphis wrestling, before we start this, I think we should just kind of talk about our impressions of Memphis wrestling. Dave, you want to go ahead and start that? I know you didn't grow up watching it, but now, what are your impressions of Memphis wrestling?
Well, I knew of Memphis from the wrestling magazine, from the After Mags. I knew about that, and then, we were just talking about David Letterman. Probably my first exposure to Jerry Lawler was when him and Andy Kaufman were on the Letterman show, and I knew who that was. I knew who he was from the magazines, and of course I knew who Andy Kaufman was, and I watched Saturday Night Live, so I knew the whole women wrestling. But I noticed in the mags that Memphis had a lot of gimmicks. Lord Humongous, Frankenstein. They had their monsters. And then I was exposed to them when they started coming to Dallas, when they bought into the territory. And then, I knew who Jeff Jarrett was. I really didn't know who Jerry Jarrett was. So, but we had Jeff Jarrett and Tojo Yamamoto and P.Y. Chuhai, which was Phil Hickerson, and Tony Falk, and of course Lawler started coming to town.
You know what my wrestling name was back in the day? P. High Poop Low.
Well,
But
I will just say Memphis was really my first experience with wrestling. Um, I can remember watching it on Saturday morning, young, 5, 6, 7 years old. Um, I'm with you. Like, I don't ever remember Jerry Jarrett necessarily, but Lance Russell
he was
and
when he became a promoter instead of a wrestler. He wasn't on TV much. He wasn't a
right,
Vince McMahon or Eric Bischoff angle as a right.
right. Yeah, he wasn't like the general
He,
manager or
he
anything.
wasn't like Bill Watts, who was on the commentary. He didn't do that either, I don't think, right? So he
No,
really didn't.
Do you
no,
remember him as a wrestler?
no. Now, when I was working on research for the trivia and listening to some different things, he really didn't wrestle very long. And he's got and we'll talk about it. He's got a very unique story about how he got involved, how he started wrestling. But no, he really didn't start wrestling. He actually started promoting before he even was a wrestler. So, he didn't really need it, I guess, in a sense. And so he really didn't wrestle for very long. But no, he wrestled like in the 60s, early 70s. And I was born in 76. So I missed that. Again, I just remember it was wildly entertaining. I love the studio setup that they had. Like, I just really liked that close quarters and Lance Russell, doing the interviews, and he would be like getting on to the heel kind of thing, and
Yeah.
the baby faces coming out, and just I like, and the people in the audience, like, I really like that studio setting that I saw. So
It's a lot
I
like
can,
it was a lot like Georgia.
yes, when you look at them both together, I mean,
Just a
yeah,
few
it
steps
is.
from the ring.
Yes,
They could go
and I
from the
like
podium to
that.
the ring.
Yes, and they did their interviews, and yes, and then they'd go straight to the ring or whatever, and that's where all the action was. And like I
So
said,
Memphis wrestling to you was what WWE Superstars was to me on Saturday mornings.
hmm
That's what in 1989, but that's what you were getting in the early 80s
hmm
from Memphis.
hmm
And
definitely.
that's
And mine was different because I had world class, but I watched more Saturday night wrestling because I was out working on Sundays.
hmm
So they did their interviews way back away from the ring,
hmm
like back by the horse stalls, and because it was always at Will Rogers Coliseum. So seeing Georgia do it with the podium that close to the ring, seeing then now I've seen Memphis do it, and world class from the Sportatorium, they might do some right down there at ringside. Sometimes they did them at the top of the aisle where Bill Mercer sat because
hmm
he was at the top of one of the aisles, had his little backdrop, and that's where he would call the action from. So I really, really like, and Lance Russell, my goodness, Lance
yeah,
Russell was so good.
one of the
Yes,
best. I'm sure you look forward to every week and just having Lance there because you just felt like he was taking you through a journey every week, and he was
exactly.
one of the best, you
Yes,
know.
he definitely was. He was very entertaining. I think it's
Oh,
my.
that ain't right. One of
Come
the.
Come
come
on.
on now, yeah. Um, and I think it is Mike Brown. I don't feel like Mike is the right.
Yes.
It is Mike Brown?
Was it Dave Brown?
Dave Brown. Thank you. I knew Mike didn't sound right. Dave Brown was they were a great team. And so, I think that them together, like I said, really helped tell the stories that were going on behind the scenes in the ring and whatever in that studio setting. So like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed that Memphis. And I can remember, I know I saw Jeff Jarrett when he started, like he was like 18. I can
Yeah.
remember a very young Jeff Jarrett in the wrestling
Oh yeah,
ring.
he was skin and bones when he came to Dallas.
And what's really interesting, if you look back at pictures of Jerry Jarrett,
Yes.
they look a lot like now, but they really look a lot like a young Jeff Jarrett and a young Jerry Jarrett. They really do look a lot alike.
Well, let's get into our trivia since we've kind of set the tone for Memphis wrestling.
Yeah, let's learn a
Get into
little
our-
bit. All right, so our first question is Mr. Jarrett passed away on Valentine's Day of this year, but did you know that his birthday also at times falls on a holiday? What holiday would that be? Is it Labor Day,
Labor Day.
Memorial Day, Father's Day, or Thanksgiving?
I'm going Labor Day.
It's Labor Day.
Yes, his birthday is September 4th, 1942. So, yes, you all are both correct. Good deal. Who was Jerry Jarrett's famous father-in-law? Was it Nick Goulas, Lance Russell, Eddie Marlin, or Tommy Gilbert?
I believe
Eddie
it was
Marlin?
Eddie Marlin. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You are correct. That is 2 for 2. Way to go.
Yeah.
Eddie Marlin was famous for being a tag team partner with Tommy Gilbert. They won multiple tag teams. They won the NWA World Six-Man Tag Championship, the NWA Southern Tag Team Championship, NWA Mid-America Tag Team Championship. He was also a general manager for Memphis Continental Wrestling on screen.
We're on fire, Justin.
We are.
All right.
Who knew that had a general manager on screen? I never knew
Yeah,
that.
Eddie Marlin would be the general manager on screen. Mr. Jarrett is the proud graduate of what college found in Nashville? Are you going to go 3 for 3?
Well,
I don't know that.
you're not getting a choice.
Yeah,
No.
choice.
I'm not giving you a choice.
I know this isn't Nashville, but it's close enough. I'm gonna go Wolford.
No, it's not Wilford.
I know it's not.
Peabody College.
Ooh.
You looked that up. I know you did. Yes, it is. It is the Peabody College. Now, let me tell you a little bit of
That's
history.
where the Ducks came from. That's where they named the Ducks after.
That is not. That is no. That is not. That's not. So Peabody College.
Oh, you're
That's
right.
not even
It's
the
in
right city.
It's in my notes.
Exactly. I knew it. We're still going to put y'all.
I put my notes away for this, unlike some people over there. So I'm
Exactly.
gonna go ahead and put a protest on the results of this. But go ahead.
Yes, and I do appreciate that, Justin, as hard as I work. So the Peabody College now is known as the Vanderbilt Peabody College of Education and Human Development. Now, when Mr. Jarrett attended, it was not with Vanderbilt yet. It did not. The college did not. I can't think of the word. Did not come together with Vanderbilt. That's not the right word I'm trying to think of. But until 1979. But what I found interesting, and I'd love to ask
Accredited?
Jeff. No, when two things merge. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Vanderbilt and Peabody College merged in 1979. And what I would love to ask Jeff Jarrett is, what is Mr. Jarrett's degree in? Because the Peabody College was a college for teachers, education. So I wonder if he has an education degree. I don't know. I would love to know that. So I am going to
He's
try
a
to
wrestling promoter, so he's probably got a BA and BS.
He probably does. Oh, Lord, he's got control of that. We're going to have to work on that.
To get my own one.
That's funny. All righty. Mr. Jarrett had his first match in Hayti, Missouri. In what year? And I can give you some choices. Was it 1963, 1965, 1967, or 1969? When did he have his very first match?
65.
What you think,
I
Dave?
want to say it was 65.
You both would be correct. I'm going to have to make these harder.
I almost went 63, and I thought, I think
We're going to have to get that button away from him. All right. Exactly. During Mr. Jarrett's wrestling career, how many different tag team championships did he hold? Is it 2, 3, 4, or 5?
You were naming them off. I'm going to say 3.
4.
It is actually 5.
Oh.
Now, he won tag team gold 14 times, but with 5 different titles. Mm-hmm. So he won the inaugural CWA, Continental Wrestling Association, World Tag Team Championship with Tojo Yamamoto. He won the NWA Mid-America Tag Team Championship with George Goulas. He won the NWA World Tag Team Championship Mid-America version with Jackie Fargo. He won the NWA Tennessee Tag Team Championship one time with George Goulas. He won the NWA Southern Tag Team Championship Mid-America version. He won that 10 times. 5 times with Tojo Yamamoto, 4 times with Jackie Fargo, and 1 time with Johnny Marlin. So he
was the Jerry Lawler of the tag division.
He was definitely a tag team dude.
I feel bad that he had to wrestle with George Goulas and win a tag team championship.
There's a good story about that later. So it's real interesting. I mean, but that George Goulas, bless his heart, nepotism at its finest, I guess, is really what helped push Jerry Jarrett to go out on his own and ended up creating Continental Wrestling Association. Yeah. So, whose eyeball did Mr. Jarrett claim to pull out during a match discussed on Tales of the Territory?
I know this answer.
Was it Roy
Welch? We talked about this in the archives.
Ox Baker?
Yeah. Nope.
Sam Bass?
Nope.
Mario Galento?
Yes.
That's the guy. That's the son of a bitch right there. That one-eyed bastard.
Yes. So the story goes, according to Mr. Jarrett, is that Roy Welch sent Galento to threaten him because Welch thought, Welch, who was the Nashville promoter, thought Jerry was trying to steal the territory from him. And Mr. Welch was suffering from Alzheimer's and maybe had some whispering in his ears. Again, all this is according to Jerry Jarrett. So Jerry Jarrett was in a match with Jerry Lawler on TV when Galento attacked him. Jerry Jarrett went into shooter mode and he put his finger in Mario's eye, pulled it out. And Galento he ended up with 200 stitches from that situation.
Did you get the impression when you met Mr. Jarrett that he would be the type of guy that would pull a man's eye out?
Well, I got a story about, if you want to hear about it. So whenever Mr. Jarrett decided he wanted to wrestle, he went to the promoters and Roy Welch and Nick Goulas. He was talking to them, and apparently his mother, who was the bookkeeper for the promotion, heard the conversation and told them, he said she had an office in the back, and she came up front and she said, the first time you put him in a match is my last day. I will quit. So
that is Christine Jarrett.
That is Christine Jarrett. Teeny is what she was, her nickname. Yes, Miss Christine Jarrett. So Mr. Jarrett said that him and his mother talked, went back and forth for a little bit, and she was very much concerned about his safety. He had been promoting. She worked in the office. People might try to take advantage of him. So she said that she asked Sailor Moran, who was a well-known shooter, I guess, in the area, to train. He had been working with Tojo Yamamoto with wrestling. That is who trained him. And so he went to do some training with Sailor Moran. And at first, Miss Christine Jarrett wanted him, she was hoping that Sailor would beat him up enough that he'd just say, forget it, I don't want to do this. But he kept coming back and kept coming back. So he said he was going to train him. And what he told him is that your hands have the smallest bones and your head have the biggest bones. So it's stupid to take your smallest bones and hit the biggest bones of someone's, of someone's body. If you're in a fight, you've got the throat is very, what do you say, is grizzled. It has grizzle and a esophagus. And he also talked about the eye. These are weak parts. Your testicles, your throat, and your eye. And so Sailor Moran showed him several things in case he ever needed to take care of himself in the ring. And he showed what he can do in the ring when Mario Galinto decided to attack him during a match. So I thought that was quite interesting. So now we know where he got his moves from. So let's see here.
If you want to see more of that story, you can see it on Wrestling with the Territories. Is that what it's called? Or
Yes.
Check out the Memphis show, and it's on there.
Yes. What date? Oh.
No, go ahead.
Oh, what date was Continental Wrestling Association established?
Oh.
The date?
The date.
Or the year?
I'll let you give me the year. But there is a date.
1977.
It is 1977. You want to take a gander at the month?
I got a 1 in 365 chance of getting it.
True. It starts with the letter M. Does that help? No. The month.
May 5th.
No.
March 18th.
It was March 20th, 1977.
Oh, man, I started to say the 20th, but that's my ex-wife's birthday, and I didn't want to ring the room. I already feel bad enough about eating a Cracker Barrel at 4 o'clock in the afternoon today.
So the story with Continental Wrestling Association is Nick Gulas ran Nashville, and Jerry Jarrett was running, or they kind of had it split. Like Jerry Jarrett was running Memphis. I'm going to get this wrong. Louisville, like he had like the west side, and Nick Gulas had the east side.
Yeah.
And Nick Gulas did want his son George to be put over in Memphis, and unfortunately, Greg Gulas was not a great wrestler, and
Yeah.
George. I'm sorry, Greg. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Greg Gagne. I guess. He was not a great wrestler, and Nick obviously put him over veterans and well-established workers, and it didn't go over very well. And so that was kind of, I guess, the last, the final straw. So that is how they decided that they were going to, or that Mr. Jarrett decided that he was going to split from Roy Welch and Nick Gulas and go out on his own and do his own promotion. All right. Let's see here. On a fishing trip, it is said, on a fishing trip, Bob Ryder, Jeff Jarrett, and Jerry Jarrett were discussing the idea of a company not reliant on TV, but rather one going straight pay-per-view. In what year did Jeff and Jerry Jarrett found the promotion NWA Total Nonstop Action?
2002.
2003.
It was 2002. I was going to give you 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003.
Well, I was thinking 3 immediately, so I just went with that. But yeah.
Well, what happened is that it was right after WCW folded. And if you listen to Conversations with Conrad, and I am so happy that he did that over there on ad-free shows. They actually have it for free on YouTube for anybody to watch. It's the Conversations with Conrad, and it's talking with Jerry Jarrett. And it's just documenting the history that he had in the wrestling business. Because as you know, as you said, we've lost him and we've lost that voice. And luckily we have things, recorded. But he was talking about how they attempted to, or there was an attempt, I guess with a lot of different people, about potentially buying WCW, like gathering, that potential sale. But after the fall of WCW, they were all out on a fishing trip and they were talking about kind of a future of wrestling. And again, that's where the idea came that, well, maybe we don't do, it's not relying on television. Maybe we do something that's like a weekly pay-per-view. And so that's where the idea of total nonstop action. Vince Russo came on board, and listening to Mr. Jarrett talk, he's not a huge fan of Vince Russo.
No.
And he thinks that he was a bad influence even on Jeff and maybe some of his decision making. So I thought that was kind of interesting to listen to. I'm sorry.
Were either of you viewers of that show at the time?
I did not watch TNA.
I didn't either.
Honestly, at that time, I had just gotten married. Olivia was born, so I just didn't. We would watch some pay-per-views, but my viewing was definitely not like it had been.
I watched it every week.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I loved it.
So you liked the pay-per-view?
That first episode where Toby Keith got me, because I was a huge Toby Keith fan.
Did you like
I was into it.
The week to week, like, was it what'd you pay, or how did that work? What did you have to do?
Well, you were supposed to pay $9.99. It was $9.99 every week.
Oh, okay.
It was $10 pay-per-view every week.
I
may or may not have had a friend that gave me cards that unlocked everything.
A cheat code.
Yeah.
Until it got,
What was it they used to have? They used to call them
the scramblers.
Scramblers. That was it. Yeah. I was thinking buzzer, like something. Yeah, scramblers.
I'm not saying I did. I'm not saying I didn't. Also, the conversation with Jerry Jarrett, I took that link and I put it on our social media from the PONDWATER Dave Show account on Twitter, so you can find that.
It really is. If you're interested, if you're interested in wrestling history and what was going on behind the scenes, and I like I said, I enjoyed Memphis wrestling, but I was like 7 years old. So now I'm having this opportunity to go back throughout all of the wrestling that I loved and see, I love listening to Tony Schiavone and what happened when, because again, I enjoyed, Georgia Championship Wrestling. And so you're getting to see all the behind of what was going on, even WWF, we're learning a lot about the more behind the scenes. We kind of talked, Vince McMahon was a commentator on the show. In reality, he owned everything, but you didn't know that as a fan, that, as a 10 or 12-year-old watching Hulk Hogan, like, you didn't know about contract disputes and people, the Iron Sheik and Duggan getting pulled over together. And, we just, unless you were in that area or unless you were maybe a little bit older and reading, I read the WWF magazine, but they're not putting that in it. I just enjoyed it for the pure entertainment as a child. But as I've gotten older, I've really enjoyed learning the history, I guess is what I was trying to say. And you're right. The conversations with Conrad that he's done have been really, really eye-opening and really fun to listen to.
Well, also, we live in an age where there's plenty of shoot interviews and there's plenty of other podcasts. And if you're listening to us, there's a pretty good chance that you've heard these before. So Jerry Jarrett was not out there doing lots of interviews. So if you were listening to anybody that came through Memphis, you're hearing that he's getting rich and he's not paying the boys. And then if you listen to Bruce, you hear, I mean, his whole bit about Jerry Jarrett with the chicken salad. Well, first, and he does all, and he talked about, I mean, just his way that he portrays Jerry Jarrett. If you didn't know, and you just Bruce's exposure to you would think he's a buffoon, and he's not. And if you listen to Steve Austin, you think that he's a greedy, carny tightwad, and he might have been. But what I'm saying is, they just didn't ever. He's not out there, so him getting to sit down with Conrad, you got his side of the story, and you learned a little bit about him, and you got a better perception of him that you might not get from the second hand from your favorite podcast. And probably Jim Cornette's the only one that's ever treated him fairly. So, I mean, that's just good. I mean, he did the same thing for Jim Hurd. We've heard everybody else's stories. Now, I'm not saying Jim Hurd didn't suck. There's no doubt in my mind that Jim Hurd sucked. Arn Anderson doesn't make it a habit to talk bad about people, and he's got nothing good to say about Jim Hurd.
No, he does not.
So, but I mean, at least we got where Jim Hurd's head was at the time and what his thinking was. So, I mean, there's always two sides to every story.
Exactly. And I don't want to say you take it. I mean, you listen to what Mr. Jarrett is saying, and of course, that's from his point of view. And so, but looking back at the remarkable career, and like I said, looking back at that history, there's a lot of things that would not have happened or did not happen until Memphis or Jerry Jarrett. You know, I mean, a lot of more innovative ideas and different things. And a lot of people came through Memphis, even if it was just for a short time. You know, everybody who's anybody probably, you know, had a run in Memphis at some time. So, you know, it's really, yes, I'm so glad you put that link, because I really hope people give that a listen, because you get to hear him speak about it. And he's not really peppered with a bunch of questions. You know, he's there to tell his story about how he got started and tell about Memphis. So, I mean, you know.
Well, I'm glad that's out there and being shared, because that's premium content over at Ad Free Shows. So they didn't have to share that. And it's just, you know, it's the right thing to do right now to expose the masses to Jerry Jarrett.
Definitely.
And, I mean, and I had the opportunity to meet him this past year, and I'm glad I did.
Yes, I think all three of us did.
Really
we got the opportunity
to getting to meet him.
Yes, it was. He was a very nice man. I wish I knew more. I think I would have asked him more questions, but then, you know, he might have been like, okay, I got to go. No, this is how these questions lined up for him. But yes. All right. Number 9. What year did Mr. Jarrett enter the NWA Hall of Fame? Was it 2009, 2010, 2011, or 2012?
Flexing my big brain.
You cheated. No, the Hall of Fame.
I did not. I did research. I researched the show.
I'm just kidding.
Hey, and at my age, retaining knowledge
and numbers, right? No.
Yeah.
So the NWA Hall of Fame.
I just learned. I've been married to my wife we've been together 12 years, and I just finally got to where I didn't have to look up her phone number. I actually remember it. And we were probably married 6 years before I quit looking at Facebook to find out when her birthday was.
Yeah, you got to, yes. Well, good for you. I'm very proud. So the NWA Hall of Fame was established in 2005. And the inductees receive a commemorative medal with their name on it, and along with the NWA logo, which is engraved on it. So Mr. Jarrett, along with Gene Kaniski, Terry Funk, Paul Orndorff, Tully Blanchard, Neil Mascaris, Dennis Corluzza, Corluzza, Corluzzo, thank you. Jim Cornette talks a lot about him. Corluzzo, yes.
Corluzzo was, I believe, when they did the whole NWA angle on Raw, Corluzzo was there with him.
Okay.
He might have actually been the president of the National Wrestling Alliance for a little while at that time.
Maybe so, because I think he was a promoter. They are all members
Jersey,
of the class of 2009. All right. Where did Justin go? I want him to hear this last question.
He's going to get it wrong anyway.
I don't know. It's pretty easy, I think. Okay, I'll just say it to you then. This popular American cuisine is believed to first be served in Wakefield, Rhode Island, created in 1863, created by Liam Gray. What are you laughing at?
Oh, you know.
Mr. Gray mixed chicken, grapes, mayonnaise, and tarragon together for a tasty meal. What is this American cuisine that I am speaking of?
On three, Justin, on three. 1, 2, 3. Chicken salad.
He's so good. Yes,
you know.
It is chicken salad.
What I recommend instead of the grapes, I recommend the dried cranberries.
Yes. Apples, pecans, walnuts. There's all kinds of stuff you could do. But 1863 is when the first chicken salad is said to have been served in Wakefield, Rhode Island.
What year did you say?
1863.
Oh, okay.
Let me make sure now. 1863.
Yeah, it was during the Civil War. They had to come up with some shit to get that chicken to last longer.
They were making chicken salad out of chicken shit, y'all.
That's right.
No kidding. He had some, really. Up in Rhode Island, though, did they even know anything was going on in the Civil War? Probably not. He had some leftovers, and he had to figure out something to do. So that is our trivia for Mr. Jerry Jarrett. So hope you all enjoyed it. You all surprisingly got a lot more than I thought. I'm going to have to work on that, make it harder.
Well, it helps PONDWATER what he had his notes over there. I'm just saying. Like I said, I'm protesting the results of this trivia this week. But we are going to talk, of course, we all know, as Amy alluded to earlier, the great Jerry Winston Jarrett passed away on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2023. And so we thought this week would be a great time to recognize his life, his career, the people that he touched, the business that he changed. So, Amy, you're the expert on this, so why don't you lead the way?
I don't know if I'd be the expert. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed Memphis wrestling. So, Mrs. Teeny Jarrett. So, Mr. Jarrett will say it this way. His dad went to war, and he came back, but he did not come back to them. So that left his mother, Christine, Teeny was her nickname, Mr. Jarrett, and a sister. She had to go to work. So she got a job at the Five and Dime in town, and then she got a second job selling wrestling tickets to the wrestling show for Nick Goulas and Roy Welch. And Hill said that he, again, with the conversations with Conrad, he talked about how him and his sister would be sitting on a Coke box in the little room or whatever where she was selling tickets. And he went with her pretty much during that time. And then as he got older, he got to sell programs and he got to do some things. He got a hardship license at 14 so that he could drive a truck to help set up rings and do promotions and that kind of stuff. He went to college, and again, what's really interesting about his story is that he ended up promoting and not being a wrestler. So the story goes from Mr. Jarrett is that he would ride with Mr. Welch to the different, as you can imagine, 50, 60 years ago, what the road, we have our interstates and we go 70, 75. And sure, was not like that in those days. So he would ride with Mr. Welch and they would talk in the car about, what do you think about this? And what would you do? And I guess he kind of picked his brain. And for about 3 months, Mr. Jarrett was booking, but Roy was kind of giving those orders. And so when he made the announcement that Mr. Jarrett was going to start booking, like a lot of the veterans, they scoffed and they kind of said some things, but he was like, Mr. Welch was like, he's been booking you all for the last 3 months. I've just been telling you it's me. So they had a little bit more faith, I guess you could say, when he started doing that.
It sounds like that Jerry Jarrett and Bruce Pritchard both had similar paths in the wrestling business, because
kind of starting out doing
all that. Bruce was doing all that as a kid too.
Yes, and I guess with his mother Teeny being in, again, her role got bigger over time. She ended up being their bookkeeper, and so she ended up
being like their super secretary, but she basically kept them in a row when they weren't necessarily doing it.
You know what? I completely forgot a huge part of the story about the split. And it's really okay. And I'm sorry about that. So I'll go ahead. If it's okay, I'm going to go back and tell you. So what happened is, it is true, like I said, Nick Gulas wanted his son George Gulas pushed in Memphis, where
he needed to push out the door.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there were some people that wanted to do that. Where Jerry Jarrett was promoting. Now, like I told you earlier, it was kind of like west and east. And Nick Gulas ran the east and Jerry Jarrett ran the west. And Mr. Jarrett was making money, Nick was losing money. But when you put them together, Mr. Jarrett was pretty much covering the losses of Nick Gulas. So after that, Mr. Jarrett was like, no, I'm not going to promote George. And apparently,
I don't want to commit business suicide. So no,
pretty much. And that's pretty much, pretty much what he was saying. So apparently, when Mr. Jarrett was a little bit younger and was promoting, he gave Nick Gulas $50,000, thinking he was getting a portion of the promotion. Okay? So after he was like, I want you to push George, and he was like, no, I'm not going to do it. He goes, just give me my portion of the promotion and I'll go off and do my own thing and you don't have to worry about me. Apparently what Mr. Gulas did is he tricked him. He wrote the contract. It was a pretty shady deal. Mr. Jarrett gave $50,000 for the option to buy a portion of the promotion, and the option had expired.
Yeah.
So he did a deal with Mr. Gulas, thinking that he was buying part of the promotion, but then they got a hold of it and they wrote the contract out saying that you were buying for the opportunity to buy a part, and that option had expired.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's
you know what? I think we see later on in life with Jerry Jarrett that he would become a very good businessman, not just in wrestling, but in other parts of life. And I think this was one of his first big lessons.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
definitely. And I think it almost made him he was kind of okay with the status quo. You know what I'm saying? Like he was definitely promoting very well, and Nashville and Huntsville, like those areas were lagging. And so he was making, he's making the money. Mr. Goulas is losing, so they're putting it together and they're splitting it. So in a way, he's kind of getting, robbed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he would have been okay with that because he was in a partnership, that he was, in a partnership with them. But then when he got screwed, I think that motivated him. He knew he could do it. And so that motivated him to get out on his own. The other thing, Justin, kind of to build on what you were saying, is that he got a lot of lessons from his mother.
Mm-hmm.
She says it's not important what you bring in, it's not the top line that counts, it's the bottom line that counts. So he was very much a saver, just like you said. He bought land. He had other businesses. He, did rental. So he was very diversified. Came from the teachings from his mother. And I can imagine I can't even imagine a single woman in the late 40s, early 50s trying to put together, a home for her, making sure that she's making enough money to support herself and her kids with no help.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure she had to be very scrupulous with her money. And doing the booking for the wrestling promotion, she definitely had a good eye.
Yeah.
She knew what expense, things could be like, and that she, like I said, she told him it's not the top line that counts, it's that bottom line and what you save. And I mean, he had a massive fortune, whether he screwed people or was a tightwad, like some of the wrestlers might think or whatever. He was very diversified, and he was a very good businessman. And because of some, like you said, some lessons learned the hard way, and some lessons, I think, from his mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, good. Yeah, I think one of those pieces of property he bought was George Jones and Tammy Wynette's house.
Yes,
Yeah.
he had just bought it, and then he basically quit. Quit, and he said he spent about 2 days crying. Like, what am I going to do? And then he just had a conversation with his wife, and she was very supportive. She knew he could do whatever, whatever he put his mind to, and he made it work. And like I said, he definitely was someone that changed the wrestling business.
Well, yeah, because when you sell a wrestling promotion, what are you selling?
Right. Exactly.
This is our territory. Well, he just said, you screwed me, so I'm gonna screw you right back. And he just started going and booking those towns himself. That's
right. He went to the TV station, like the number 3, and said, he wanted to put his shows on. He knew television was very, very important. He had the wrestlers, he had always treated them fairly. He had the wrestlers, with them. And that's how he ended up getting Lance Russell and Dave Brown. He knew he had to put together quite the team. But like I said, he made a lot of promises. Like I said, he told that TV station that, I can't remember which it was, but it was the lower ranking, TV station in town that, you come, you put me on, and, you're going to be beating them off a stick trying to advertise. And so, they were doing Memphis wrestling was doing just astronomical numbers on Saturday. I mean,
Mhm.
pretty much the whole town is watching it on Saturday, you know, and
Right.
so it was huge. And so the getting the TV station to go along with them, getting Lance Russell involved, getting Dave Brown, like it was just all those little pieces falling into place that caused, you know, the Memphis wrestling that we all came to know and love. So with Continental Wrestling, that's when we really start seeing some up and comings, I guess you could say. The Freebirds were there. And, you know, one of the things that I think was really interesting, again, I know that conversations with Conrad when he's talking to Mr. Jerry Jarrett, it is Mr. Jarrett's story. So, you know, but he always seemed to be very open to ideas, you know, when he's talking and stuff. The Fabulous Freebirds, they wanted the actual song Freebirds from Leonard Skinner to be played. And Mr. Jarrett agreed to that. That was probably one of the first times that music had been used, like a set music, to accompany a group coming in. And this was like late 70s. So, but we kind of start seeing things like that through Mr. Jarrett and at Continental Wrestling.
Well,
One
then
of the
it took
thing-
off in a big way. Because then
yes.
they started doing music videos like with the Fabulous ones
Yes.
and the rock and roll. I think they pioneered doing music videos in wrestling.
Yes, exactly. They were definitely innovative, you know, at least willing to try something, you know, because what happened is that the Freebirds went from Memphis, they went to Georgia, they went to Louisiana, you know, with Junkyard Dog, and then, you know, Florida, and then you end up in WCCW. And so, you know, where the magic really happened, right? And
Yeah, because they didn't get Buddy until they went to Mid South. Watts put Buddy with them.
right, exactly. And there was a funny story that Mr. Jarrett was just talking about how, you know, Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes were there at Memphis, and he's like looking at Terry Gordy, he's like, "How old are you, boy?" You know, and Michael Hayes goes, "He's 21," and he's like 15 years old. You know, he's a big man. You know, he was quite young when he started, but that was kind of I thought that was kind of a funny little
He was
story.
so incredibly good, though.
Yes, gone before his time, unfortunately. I think too, Mr. Jarrett was very much, he did a lot of talent exchanges. He did, you know, I know he was talking about how when Jerry Lawler broke his leg, you know, they had to keep the territory going. And so talking about how they were going to, he brought Jimmy Hart in, and he just said, you know, you're going to have to carry it. And so that's when they started thinking about ways to do it. And Jimmy Hart was bringing in different people saying, you know, Jerry Lawler's, you know, he's gone, and this is the new king and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, there was a lot of cast of characters that were coming in and out. Mr. Jarrett said that you have to he always tried to make things make sense and believable, you know, like he didn't like things like, I mean, he probably is not super happy with what was probably going on some of the shows that are out there now. But, you know, he was talking about how he had a conversation with, was it Eddie Graham? Who was in Florida?
He talked to Eddie Graham a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think it was Eddie Graham. He said that he had a conversation with Eddie Graham because he was like, what is all this? What's this coal miners on a pole, or coal miners glove on a pole match, you know? And he's like, Mr. Jarrett's like, well, it's like a glove that's on a pole, and you put it on there, and then whoever gets to it can use it to beat the other person up. And Mr. Graham was like, why does that even make sense? Like, why would you do that? He said, well, you need to know that the last 3 matches that these people have had, the manager would, throw the bad guy something, and he would hit the good guy with it, and then he'd put it down in his pants. And so the good guy's not going to do that, just to do it. You have to have a gimmick to be able to create the ability for the good guy to get the glove and beat the crap out of the bad guy. And so he was like, oh, that makes sense, So I think that's kind of an interesting, too, all the different promoters talking to each other and what they talked about, and the fact that Mr. Graham was calling Jerry Jarrett saying, what is this coal miner's glove on a pole called,
And the funny thing is now, Jerry Jarrett became kind of a conservative when it comes to wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But really, Memphis was not the conservative territory growing up. That was where the wild stuff kind of happened, was in Memphis.
Definitely. But,
the concession stand brawl.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Again, giving them something. I mean, if you really hate somebody and you're fighting, are you going to stop just because they roll out of the ring? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it kind of makes sense. If you have this animosity, like, it makes sense that you would go all over the place because you really, really don't like this person. The fact that Andy Kaufman and that whole story went the way it did had to be because of the openness of the promoter Jerry Jarrett and the openness of Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman. And Mr. Jarrett said that, Andy Kaufman didn't even tell his family. Like, he kayfabed it completely. Even the people on the show Taxi that Andy Kaufman was on, on television, they thought this wrestler was beating him up. Like, he never let anyone know that they were all working together.
And he never cashed a check that Jerry wrote him.
That's right. Yeah.
For wrestling.
Yeah, he said that too. He said he really, Andy Kaufman really enjoyed the way that the story played out in real time. He's like, when you're on TV, you say cut, go stand over here, like the movie magic that PONDWATER is going to have to do for this episode later, But Andy Kaufman really, really enjoyed kind of that live theater. And he said, Mr. Jarrett said that he never told him anything. Like, everything was Andy Kaufman's idea. And, everything he did was something that he came up with. And I think, again, you have to have that openness, and you have to have that, that free thinking to see this might just get over, If you were too tight, if you were too worried about your son getting over, or if you were too, we could have really missed. And that, like you said, that was such a pivotal part of wrestling, bringing it mainstream to where, I mean, it's a huge part of the movie Man in the Moon. It's a huge part of wrestling itself. Like you said, they were on the David Letterman show, and, Kaufman comes out there with a neck brace, and he didn't even tell his family that this was not, that this was a work, and so you can only imagine what other people were thinking out there in the audience and watching on Letterman, this poor little actor. And Jerry Lawler, huge. I mean, he's a shorter person, but he is stout. What that must have looked like, and how much heat that brought, and how much attention that brought to Memphis, and how lucky, they were.
Oh, it was powerful. I mean, when he took that coffee and threw it in his face, and that may have been one of the first times I ever watched David Letterman.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was dating a girl that introduced me to the Letterman show.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching that episode. It was crazy.
It was. That was absolutely pivotal. I mean, it really, really was pivotal, and it brought way more eyeballs on that little territory of Memphis because of Andy Kaufman, wanting to work that story, and the Memphis territory wanting to work it with them. They had to be partners in it, and I can only imagine.
Vince Jr. wanted that.
Well,
Vince Jr. wanted that, but his father wanted no part of it.
I was going to say
his father wouldn't have any part of it.
Right.
So Andy Kaufman went home with Bill Apter.
Oh,
They were hanging out, and Bill was roommates with a wrestler named Susan Sexton at the time from England, and she kind of just blew.
Oh, a woman? He was rooming with a woman. Okay.
Yeah, and she came out there, and they were cutting up, and she just kind of told them to F off, and she went to bed. But so Bill called Jerry Lawler.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry Lawler he told him what Andy wanted to do, and then they got with Jerry and got it done. But Bill Apter's the reason that happened in Memphis, because Vince Senior wouldn't have anything to do. He didn't want those Hollywood types.
Yeah.
And so Bill said, "Well, let's talk to Jerry Lawler," and that's how it happened.
Like I said, all those pieces had to fall. Jerry Lawler had to have a promoter that he could, toss that idea out, and someone that was open to see what that could be doing. And so, I mean, like I said, it was quite pivotal. Speaking of Mr. Vince McMahon, Mr. Jarrett talks about a conversation that he had with Vince McMahon Sr., and they talked quite a bit, again, I guess, as all the promoters did. And he did ask, Mr. Jarrett said that Vince Sr. asked that Jerry Jarrett be a friend to Vince McMahon when he needed it. And, Mr. Jarrett said that, that wasn't like a common conversation that they had. And Mr. McMahon went on to live a few more years. But he was just saying, my son's out there. He's trying to do some different things. And, he's going to need a friend one day.
That was really wise advice, because I think Vince Sr. saw what was coming. In a way. He saw that there was going to be a tossing and turning of the NWA, so to speak. And I think he probably knew the ambition that Vince had, and he knew that Vince was going to need some friends going down the road. And that's probably long-term booking on Vince Sr.'s part,
Oh, definitely. Because like you said.
Probably figured somebody was going to try to kill Junior.
Or that they would all band together. I mean, it really could have gone all different type of ways. But what did he, there was something, I think Vince McMahon said it. I wish I could remember now. But Mr. Jarrett said he wasn't worried about something. I think it had to be something with the NWA. But he's like, he didn't worry about it as much because there's no way the five of them couldn't even agree on toppings of a pizza.
Yeah.
Huh?
On lunch is usually, I think, on lunch. So,
That's funny.
That whole thing was by then getting messed up. I think Vince Sr. knew that.
Yes. And, I think it's really interesting because like you were talking about earlier, like if you're only hearing Bruce Pritchard talk about Mr. Jarrett, there is some goofiness that probably comes across. But Vince McMahon Jr. called Mr. Jarrett whenever he was in the midst of the steroid trial. And he got him that if he did go to jail, Jerry Jarrett was going to be the one in charge. Now, thinking about what you know about Vince McMahon, and now granted that we don't know that much, but after you've built that empire, who's he going to leave it to help make sure that it's still around when he gets out of jail? He's putting Jerry Jarrett in charge. So I think that should say a huge amount of what kind of promoter Jerry Jarrett was, his integrity, because, he could have, if he was a crook.
I think Vince viewed Jerry as what would be a calming influence. someone that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get overly excited, could run the ship with an even hand while Vince is gone.
Right.
Type
Knew
of
how to
guy,
run.
knew
I
how to
mean,
do it. Yeah,
he said Linda was a good, he had all these people in place, but none
yeah,
of them had ever run a promotion before.
yeah.
And
Like
so to help,
Jerry would have had Pat though. Jerry would have
yes,
had everyone
yes,
that was there, and that would have been a combination. Who knows the combination of a Pat Patterson, Jerry Jarrett together? That could have been a whole new era, weird thing of wrestling that we'd never seen before. So,
exactly. So
yeah.
yes, he had all the pieces there, but he needed someone that knew about being a promoter. And so Jerry Jarrett was asked to be that person. And so, this was what, late 80s? So,
This was
you,
early. This would have been 92 or three.
oh, 92. Okay.
This is
So
93, 94.
93,
Yeah,
94. So, he could have picked, there was others that were around is kind of what I was trying to say. I mean, it's not like he's my last pick, but so I think that should speak volumes of what kind of promoter he was.
I agree.
I mean, him and Jeff are a lot alike. They kept turning up. I mean, he left there and then he went to WCW as a consultant. I mean, I believe he was on WCW's payroll until the end,
Mm-hmm.
which led us into, after the sale of WCW and WWE to WWE, and then ECW was gone too. There was a big old void in wrestling at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when him and Jeff decided to form TNA.
During that fishing trip. That was on the trivia.
So,
And
I
like I
mean,
said, I did not watch a lot of TNA, mainly just because of the time of my life. Like I said, I had a baby and I just got married and had a new job. So, I mean, I wasn't watching it as much. But, Dave, you said you were watching it.
I thought
So,
it was exciting because, for one, they focused on the NWA. It
mm-hmm,
was tugging at my heartstrings because I've always had a soft spot for the NWA. But the initial concept is to feature talent from all around the NWA once a week.
mm-hmm,
And during the program, they had a crawl going across the bottom of the screen, like NWA Wildside, and then have the dates when they were running, or NWA Southwest,
mm-hmm.
which was Ken Taylor's promotion in the Dallas area. Because I actually went to an NWA Southwest show. I got
Cool.
to meet Terry Gordy,
Oh, cool.
and but
And
they
if
would do that. All the different NWA promotions that would plug their product, what they had coming up on a
mm-hmm.
crawl going across the bottom of the screen, and quickly they kind of got away from it. And I always thought they had a golden opportunity was because Dan the Beast Severn was the champion,
Mm-hmm.
and then he couldn't be on the first show, so they stripped him of the title. I don't know why, and Jeff said it wasn't a big deal. They never planned on doing it, but you would have thought that Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock for the NWA World Title, it would have been all right to wait till the second show for that.
Mm-hmm.
You had Toby Keith on the first show.
And I think I remember reading something that the idea of the pay-per-view was also to help they could be a little bit more edgier than being on TV. You had maybe a little less restriction. So I guess trying to get those eyeballs, and plus you had Vince Russo, who, as we know, was very instrumental in the Attitude Era and some of the things that we saw, on Raw
Well,
at
they had
that
girls
time.
dancing. They put girls in cages. They had dancing
Exactly.
girls in cages on on those pay-per-views.
Exactly. So,
I mean, they were fun. It was a
yeah,
fun product.
sure. Did you like it since you didn't have WCW? Did you look at it as a fun product? I mean, that you could get behind? Again, it is the NWA.
Yeah, that's why I was pulling for them to make it.
Mm-hmm. Where did it go? Is it whenever the Panda Energy got involved, or when did you think it maybe? When
Jump
did
the
you stop
shark.
watching? I guess
When
is
did it
what I
jump the shark?
when did it jump the shark? Yeah, when did you notice a change, or like what did you think?
the weekly pay-per-views were fun. Then they got their show, and it was hard. I mean, it was hard to stay into it.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to keep up with it. I don't know, it just wasn't keeping my attention.
Do you think that?
And then 2005, when I started training, I was kind of into my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, to me, I was excited. I liked TNA probably up until it started really getting inundated with ex-WWE talent.
Mm-hmm.
I believe when they were building up Samoa Joe, and then they brought in Kurt Angle.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of derailed Joe, and it's like flavor of the week.
Right.
You know, now we're gonna go with WWE. It's the WWE cast-off show.
Gotcha.
And I think that's when it really started not being fun for me.
Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of weird because in a way, I think sometimes you could see WCW being like that. You had a lot of ex-WWF in WCW and, we kind of see it even with AEW. I mean, there is something about having one of your favorites or someone that you've seen wrestle on a different promotion, but then, like you said, you're not really creating new stars. You're not giving, like you said, Joe was kind of pushed off,
Homegrown.
or he was, yeah.
He felt homegrown. AJ Styles felt homegrown.
Yeah.
America's Most Wanted. But, you can understand Kurt Angle coming over. That's a big deal.
Sure. Definitely.
But when Christian shows up, or Test.
Right.
Or, just you could go through, and there's some. I mean, now all of a sudden, the worst of WWF's talent is better than the best of your talent.
Right. Right.
I mean, I just don't. That's the way I was looking at it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't. They weren't building the year. They just wanted. It became WWE light.
Right.
It almost paralleled where you saw WCW going.
Right. Well,
to
and
me.
then you end up having a lot of those main characters. You had Vince Russo, you have Eric Bischoff, you have Hulk Hogan. You have some of those same players that were in WCW, which they want a job too. So, but it's, I could definitely see where, and it's not, you hear that a lot when you hear about WCW or TNA. Like, it seemed like it was a lot of WWE cast-offs and not highlighting some of the homegrown, like an AJ Styles or a Samoa Joe, or even the Briscoe brothers were on there. So.
But once the focus went away from the NWA,
yeah,
I really didn't want it. Because they wanted to form their own brand, and
right.
It just didn't hit the same for me. But that was how World Class was when they pulled out of the NWA. It wasn't the same to me,
right,
at that point,
mm-hmm.
because you can call him a world champion all you want to, but I got Ric Flair over here on the Superstation, and here comes Black Bart. Well, I'm not disparaging Black Bart. He was a good performer, but was he really a world champion?
Right.
Rick Rude had lended some credibility to it.
Right.
But, it just, we got our own world championship now, and Ric Flair's not coming to town anymore. Next.
Right. I think it's the lineage too. I love, like you said, the NWA champion was someone that traveled to all the different territories and was a workhorse, and there was a lineage that went with it.
It was wrestling. It was wrestling. It wasn't sports entertainment. Oh, and I'll tell you another thing. When I went to the six-sided ring,
mm-hmm.
Six-sided ring to me is the devil.
Mm. Have you ever had to ref a six-sided ring?
No.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know.
I will never be hungry enough to participate with a six-sided ring.
Does anybody do a six-sided ring? Right? That you know of? I don't know of anybody. I don't know a whole lot, so I'm just wondering.
I think they still do it in Mexico.
Okay. So you won't be
But
hungry enough to go to Mexico and work a lucha six-sided ring match.
no,
As a
now
ref.
that's what they do. That's what they do down there. And if I was to go down there to do that, which I will not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I mean, that's different. But if it's tax time and Joe Blow, Billy Bob got his tax return, decides he wants to be a wrestling promoter and he's going to be different, so I'm buying me a six-sided ring and we're going to be down here. And he's like, Dave, you want to come referee this show? No, Dave does not.
I gotcha.
I don't like the six-sided. I don't like the six-sided ring.
Uh-huh. Would you have to talk to Josh at Bayou Independent Wrestling if he'd said, hey, I got an idea? No.
The day that Josh Null decides a six-sided ring is a good idea is the day that I'm going to lose faith in humanity.
Oh, that's sad.
I mean, I just don't like it. It's not for me.
No, I'm just
kind of like, but it's like death matches. You're not going to see me running out to referee a death match either.
Right.
I don't
light tubes and all that stuff. I don't blame you.
That's not my thing.
Right. No, I understand that. You know, I think
unless the money's really, really good.
And Mama needs a new pair of shoes, right? I mean,
it's like, hey, Dave, we need you to referee, and this is what we're going to pay you. And I'm like, oh shit, that's a lot of money.
Right.
Then it's a job. I'm going to go, but nah.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to be real excited about it.
You know, again, unfortunately with TNA, that led to a falling out between Mr. Jarrett and Jeff. And they didn't talk for a very long time. And luckily, I have no idea what happened to get them back together, you know. But they were able to reconcile, which I think is a blessing after all, you know, with everything now that has happened. And you could, like you said earlier, I think, Dave, you can definitely see, like, Jeff Jarrett is the same DNA as his dad and his grandma, and just working it, always optimistic, always taking the opportunity of, no matter what it is, looking at it in a way that is positive and striving to do something different and not afraid to do. Could you imagine starting a wrestling promotion? Like, could you imagine doing that against, you are against WWE. I mean, they're not thinking they're going to take it over, but, you know, that's the competition that's out there. And, like, just trying to do something, like, there is a niche, there is a space for something, but, you know, to have the ability and the grapefruits, I guess you could say, in Vince McMahon words, to do something like that takes quite the positive attitude. And I mean, like I said, I feel like listening to the conversations with Conrad, listening to some other interviews that Mr. Jarrett has done and talked about, you could just see Jeff is, you know, the exact same. And, you know, look at him now. Look at Jeff now.
I 100% get Jeff Jarrett. I mean, after seeing Jeff in action at Ric Flair's last match, and I'm not talking about what you saw in the ring. I'm talking about in the back.
Right.
After seeing how all that was put together, and to see Jeff Jarrett in action, I 100% get why he is a hot commodity, why WWF would have him back, why AEW wanted him and has him, and how that he was like, we're going to do this. Because I don't think Jeff never went into it with TNA like we're going to put WWE out of business. It was just an alternative. It was another alternative.
Yes, definitely.
And he knows what he's doing, and he knows what he needed to do, and he's able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's not afraid to do the work, you know.
And Jeff Jarrett, he's on my Mount Rushmore. Mm-hmm. I think that much of him. Just from what I'm just beyond impressed with him. You can't help but love him. once you meet him. I mean, just being around him, he's got that kind of personality that you want to be around him, and
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Definitely.
and you feel like you can learn something from him every time you're around him, and you
And
know,
he's
it's
so
just
positive. Like, you know that, like you said, you're going to learn something. He's going to be able, he's looking at it in a positive way. Like, how can we do this? How's this, what do we need to do? And even if failure happens, it's not the end of the world. Like, there is more, there's lessons to be learned from that. And, you know,
it's just a life full of experiences, and his
yes,
daddy had those
yes.
experiences, and Jeff has. It's kind of like Forrest Gump.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that they're that type of character. I'm saying, remember in Forrest Gump, every time you looked up, he was in the middle of something.
Yes.
They put him in all these clips and "Have a nice day" on the bumper sticker because of
Yes.
him. But I mean, it was just he was always popping up into something, and you get the impression that Jerry Jarrett was that way, and Jeff is that way too.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm just, and my heart breaks for him because I lost my father 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't change. I mean, it don't get easier.
No.
And 30 years later, you'll come up with something, and you want to tell them something. I'd like to tell, and your dad ain't there to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff had his dad. His dad's Jeff's my age, and he had his dad for a long time, and his dad had a good long life. But my heart breaks for him and the family because, I mean, that's a void now that you can't fill.
No. And, he wanted to, Mr. Jarrett definitely thought a lot of his family, and, he wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. He wrote the book. I forgot what the name of it is. Oh, his book, The Best of Times. Is that correct? He wanted to write that for his grandchildren. Like, he was a very religious man. He was a very family oriented person. Like you said, someone that you could rally behind if you worked for. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're in this together and we're going to make this happen. I think that, and like you said, a lot of the work has been with Jeff, in the wrestling business. As far as I know, none of his other children are involved.
No, Jeff said none of them wanted to have anything to do with it.
Yeah. So, you could imagine, and I think that Jerry Jarrett was really good at it. I mean, if he is booking and promoting all these different all these different buildings, and they're making a lot of money, people are going to see it because it's entertaining to them. So, I mean, like you said, he knew the business. He knew what people wanted in their wrestling. He gave it to them. And like, I'm obviously very saddened, for the family. Anytime you lose a member of your family like that, it's never the same. But luckily, Jeff was able to overcome some demons and reconcile with his dad, and had a relationship with him at the end, instead of always wondering what if, or if I had done this or whatever.
Mr. Jarrett lived a wonderful life and a very interesting and long career in wrestling. One of the most prolific careers in wrestling of all time. From being a promoter to a wrestler to Teeny's kid growing up selling popcorn on the streets. He's done it for his whole life. And there's rarely a wrestling lifer like Jerry Jarrett. And he really was. From the time he was born until the time he died, he was involved in the business of professional wrestling, and you don't see that very often. And so it's definitely a big loss to the wrestling world.
Definitely. And Justin, before you, because I know you're wrapping up, I watched a little bit. I didn't get to see it all. Mr. Jarrett's funeral was online to where you could watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did watch it, parts of it. And one thing that Jeff was talking about was a sorry, I'm gonna cough. Was and listening to Mr. Jarrett talk during the conversations with Conrad and some other things that he did, he was like a very big he was very intelligent. And again, I think we all get the kind of the goofy buffoon, whatever, with the whole chicken salad thing. He was a very intelligent man, and he was well read, and I think well spoken. He had this quote Mr. Jeff said that he carried around this in his wallet with him at all times, and he was even being buried in it. And so I thought I would read it if y'all are okay with it. It's called The Man in the Arena, and it was given by Teddy Roosevelt. It comes from a speech called The Citizenship in a Republic, which he gave when he was in France. It says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who does not actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows at the end of the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither knew victory nor defeat." And again, I think that is that embodies, I think, Mr. Jarrett's way of thinking. A life, what does it say? Any life is a life worth living, and he definitely would never be with those cold and timid souls who never knew victory or defeat. He knew a lot of defeat, but he also knew a lot of victory. And I just thought, I think I printed it out. I think I'm going to hang on to that myself as a little reminder sometimes that, you just keep at it. Because I don't want to be with those cold and timid souls either. So we'll see.
One of my favorite speeches or whatever there by Teddy Roosevelt, The Man in the Arena. It is fantastic, and it is very apropos for Mr. Jarrett and his life. And I think that's a good way to finish for Pondwater Dave, for Amy. Dave, you got anything before we go?
Well, there's a quote that Frank Sinatra said was, "I would like to be remembered as a man who had a wonderful time living life, a man who had good friends, fine family, and I don't think I could ask for anything more than that, actually."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Jerry Jarrett checked all those boxes.
Definitely.
Yep. And we will hope that you check the box of listening to us next week. And I'm not sure what we're doing, but we will let you know on the next edition of the Pondwater Dave Show. And for myself, Justin Davis, for the incomparable Pondwater Dave and the majestic Amy Vaughn, we say adieu and peace and love, everyone.